Well, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're connecting from today. We're excited to see you here today as we talk about discovering Veeam Availability Suite version 11, configuration and management. My name is Michelle and I'll be your MC for the next hour. Thank you again for joining the conversation today. Now, before we get started, let's cover the webinar functionalities. During the session, everyone's microphones will be muted. So if you have any questions, and we want this to be an open discussion, drop your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Once again, you'll find that Q&A box by just hovering anywhere inside the platform till you see a toolbar, click Q&A and post your questions whenever they come up. We will dedicate some time to answer those questions at the end of the presentation, but if it is relevant to what we're talking about right now, we'll try and get it in live. Today's session is being recorded and we'll email a copy out to everyone by the end of next week. Our speaker today is Paul Jensen. Paul has taught IT training courses for the past 10 years. He wears multiple hats, and he's been ExitCertified's lead Veeam instructor for the past 4 years, in addition to teaching VMware and Nutanix courses. It's earning Paul the reputation of being a trusted authority among the IT operation professionals he teaches. All right, let's get started with our presentation. Paul, you can take it away.
Thanks, Michelle. Good morning, everybody, or as Michelle said, good afternoon, depending on where you're at. Today, what I want to do is go over some of the new functionality that Veeam v11 delivers. Now, where I got my list, if you will, is we've been teaching this now for the past few weeks, and I basically pulled my students. What would you like to see? So that's where I pulled my list. Is this a comprehensive list of all the cool new features of v11? No. There are some really neat additional features that v11 provides that I'm not going to have time to address in here. I will be demoing most of these. I will show what I can as we go through, but we'll kind of touch on some of those features. I'll bring up some of the points about them, and then I will go through and I will do that demo. Again, please, as I'm going through, if you have questions, put it into the Q&A, into the chat. They will be monitoring that for me. If I don't catch it, we'll catch it. If it is something that you want to ask later, feel free to do that. But I will be doing going over them, then we'll demo them. We'll talk about some of the trainings that are available along with certifications. And then finally, we'll open that up to a Q&A session as well at the end. So let's go ahead and jump in. So I'm going to start talking about CDP. One of the big interests that almost every single student came into my courses with, talked about or asked about, was continuous data protection. That's the one of the new features, obviously, of v11. This allows us to get down to a minimum of 2 seconds for the replication. We'll talk a little bit how that's accomplished, what's involved, and I'll actually show you how that's set up. Now, obviously, this is not something for every environment. The next feature that was asked to be shown, and while we talk about this in class, we talk about both of these in class, the next feature that my students wanted to see was how to set up an immutable repository. So a hardened Linux repository. This is, again, a new feature of v11 to help allow you to mitigate the effects of things like ransomware on site. Now, I will bring up again a couple of points about that as I go through that and show how that's done. I'll also show you where you can get. Veeam has created an excellent document on how to deploy one of these themselves. So I will show you where that is. Another thing that people want to see or have asked me about was the Linux proxy. Now, the Linux proxy is not new to V11. It was first introduced with V10, and this is a vSphere proxy. But in V11, this now can support all transport modes. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well, what those are, where you see that, how you can see if yours is properly set up. Of course, another new feature of V11, instant VM recovery for any backup to Hyper-V. And I will be demoing that by taking a vSphere backup and doing an instant recovery to Hyper-V and being able to show you how that works. There's also, and I actually made a typo here, instant database publish has been around. There is now instant database recovery. And there is a slight difference to that. We'll talk about what that is and what can be set up for that. There are some really neat features with this to do truly much like an instant VM recovery that's been around for years now. We can now do that with databases. Bring those up. And there's also a new feature, not only with instant database recovery, instant VM recovery to vSphere also has a similar feature where it can now be scheduled. And I'll show you that with the instant database recovery rather than have a double demo for something that is really just to show you the same type of interface. But we now have that with 11. Okay. The instant file share publish. So backup NAS was new in V10, really neat feature, ability to back up those NAS devices. With that, with V11, Veeam was able to come up with a function to very similarly show instant VM recovery, instant database recovery, there's instant disk recovery. We now can do instant file share publish. Now this is a little different. I'll show you how this works, where this is. This is a little different than instant VM recovery or even instant database recovery. This is a publish. And what that means is it's something to mount and make available. This is limited to SMB shares, and it is a read-only file share publish. Keep hitting that. So keep in mind, there are a few considerations for this. This is a first version of this feature. It's a very cool thing to be able to get your file share back up and available to your group, your end users, so they can at least access those files, maybe save them locally to put back out onto the file share when it is then truly up and running and available. Now this, my understanding is the plan is to make this an instant file share recovery. That has not been deployed yet, but at least on the forums, that is what they're looking at. Last but not least is there is a new feature with the scale out backup repository. Now, this is one that I will not be able to actually fully demo to you. I can show you up to a point, but there's a new feature on here called the archive tier. Now, in 9.5, what was it, update 3, update 4, Veeam introduced the capacity tier. In V10, they did both instant copy to capacity tier and move to capacity tier, where we can now offload or just copy our backups from what we call the performance tier, your on-site, out to a S3 compatible object storage layer, Azure, S3, Google, Amazon, obviously, capacity tier. Well, with V11, people wanted to take that longer. So what we've got now is the ability to go out to an archive tier. Now this currently is only available in 2 flavors. It's only available if you have Amazon or if you have Azure. So your capacity tier, and I'll show where the capacity tier is, must be one of those two in order to see the option for archived here. So with that, let me go in and we will open up the demo here. So I'm going to pull up my environment. So we're going to start with CDP. So you can see I've already got one that I was deleting earlier. I've got one already up and running, but I want to show you how this works. So before you set up CDP, you must, oh, I have something that went offline this morning. You must go in to your vSphere environment and install what's called an IO filter. Now, IO filters are installed at a cluster level, so you must have created a cluster in order to install it. Mine are already installed. And you can see here, I do not have that option if I go down to a host itself. So that is one of the prerequisites. You don't have to have anything configured on the cluster. You know, for those of you that are VMware, no, don't panic. You don't have to do that. You just have to configure it there. Now, if you do have multiple hosts, much like I do here, and you do the install, it will go through and want to put each one in maintenance mode in order. I'm telling you this because it can affect your environment. You know, something's going on, it's going to put it into maintenance mode, which will require all those VMs to be moved off of it. Gets released, moves on to the next one. Okay. So something to plan on when you do, if you are going to implement this, that is something to keep in mind so that you are ready for it. So, but that is really the main requirement. You have to have that IO filter installed. So when I come back here, I'm going to show you how this works. And go in, I'm going to create a new CDP policy. And call this CDP policy demo webinar. The description as is, and you can choose any VM. I've got one out there that's called UBR demo. And this is simply a Windows 2016 VM. It doesn't have anything on it except for the OS. But it's a pretty good size VM. So we've got that set up. And then you choose, where am I going to send it to? Okay, now you can send it to a specific host. You can send it to a cluster. I'm going to choose a host here. You click OK. It's going to go in, find the resource pool. If you're used to Veeam already, you'll be semi-familiar with this. It is very similar to your replication environment. Don't really want to do that particular data store, so I'm going to change the data store and go next. Now we've got a proxy. There is a lot of data being pulled very quickly. So while I have automatic selection here, I'm going to force this to go to not the one that's on my VBR server, but one that's on that I have that's dedicated. It's still a VM, but it's not sharing the resources of my VBR server. Now, how do I know if I have enough resources? Veeam has provided this nice little button here called tests. So when you click the test, it gathers information from VMware. This is not taking any snapshots. There are no stun times. This is going to look, and it's going to say, based off of that VM's performance over the past, I believe it's week, if I recall, this is the kind of resources for the source and target we need. You know, Veeam also tries to be generous. So if you look at that and you go, wow, that's a lot, really take a look at your proxy when you're doing that to see what's actually required. like I said, this one is not doing anything. It is literally just a Windows VM sitting there looking pretty on its own. But this will give you an idea of the kind of resources you might need for your proxy. And proxies can be, these proxies can be physical, they can be virtual. It's up to you. So once you've got that, I'll leave the little underscore replica as its option. Now we get to choose our retention policy. As I said earlier, the minimum retention policy is 2 seconds. Now, what that means is we pull data for 1 second and we push data for the second. So 2 seconds. Veeam really doesn't recommend you go below 15. 15 is the recommendation. Can you go lower? Yes, but again, that's the general recommendation. Now, how long do you want to handle those 15-second intervals? The default is 4 hours, but we can choose hours and we can choose minutes. So how long do I want to keep this retention policy of every, in this case, I'm going to leave it at 15 seconds. Now, this is all getting logged, and I'll show you this in a minute on inside my VMware environment. This is all getting stored on the data store in your VMware environment. And this is not sitting on a repository anywhere, anything like that. Now, obviously, over time, I may want to have longer term retention. So how often do you want me to create additional restore points? So you can set that again for any number of hours. You can then have those for X number of days. And you can even, if it is a app consistent setting, which is coming up with the guest processing, I can do it an application consistent, or I can make it crash consistent. And these are more for those long term. You do not have that choice with a short term. There's not enough time to quiesce anything. You're doing this in, 15 seconds, even if it's 15 seconds, that's too short a time to try to quiesce. We're doing these reads and writes too fast. Okay. Does the proxy? Yes. So, well, I don't believe it does really. We'll take a look, but I don't believe that the test requirement changes. I would suggest if you want it shorter, you probably are going to want to make sure that proxy is relatively close. But as you can see, yeah, this time has gone on. This one hasn't been on very long. It actually went down. Okay. And I don't believe that actually had anything to do.
And just actually to read that question out loud, Paul, the audience can't see these questions. So no worries. Michael wrote, does the proxy requirements change if we change the RPO to less than 15 seconds?
And I should have read that, and my brain read that out loud, but it read it out loud to itself very quietly. So thank you for catching me on that one. But you can see that doesn't change. And I just did that back up to 15, and the required bandwidth didn't change, nor did the memory requirements on that. So at least there, I would suggest probably keeping an eye on that proxy. Like I said, Veeam is being generous generally in those rules in that test. So I would keep an eye on the proxy. If it does seem like it's becoming overworked, obviously add more resources if it is a virtual machine, or you may want to make some adjustments, but should not, it's not going to change the test. Could it change real life? Definitely. But then again, just your utilization can change real life. The more change there is, the more the resources it's gonna need. Okay. Good question. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. So again, this has no application-aware processing that needs to happen on it, but you can do that. Again, that's only for the long-term retention. Short-term retention has no application-aware processing being done on it. Only for long-term. Again, I'm not going to enable it on this one because it's not going to really help us. Okay. And then once we apply that, this is just simply a policy. And we'll inject that policy here. And it's going to start doing that initial sync. Now, what I do want to show you, because this other one here has been syncing for a bit. I did that, I kicked that one off this morning, and it's actually doing a sync of a VM that has nothing. It is literally a blank VM. So if I come up here and I show you my CDP demo, you can see it's a Linux VM that really is, you look at that, there's nothing on it. It's saying, hey, I can't boot, right? Because I didn't install anything. So I just wanted something that was quick, was easy, would replicate very quickly for me. Okay. But we have that. Now, if I come over here and I look at the replica that I've made of this. So right now, the other one was my VBR demo here. It will show up eventually down here as it starts. There we go. It's already starting to do that initial replica. But if I look here, you'll notice I have no snapshots. Okay. There's no snaps. We don't make snaps for this. And I wanted to point this out. Okay. So it does not matter if it's got long-term retention, short-term retention, no snapshots are ever made on that particular VM. So if I come out here and I look at where it's actually being stored, come on, there we go. A VBR demo, or no, I want CDP demo, sorry. Get the right one. There's my replica. For those of you that are VMware people, you will notice there are a lot more files in here than you might be used to seeing. This is what's happening. And all of that metadata, all of those transactions, everything that's happening is getting recorded and it's stored on the repository. Or sorry, not on the repository, see, that's what happens when I talk about this, on the data store. And the repository, we're not using a repository. There was no place that said, hold my metadata here. If you're used to a normal replication in Veeam, that doesn't exist here. It's everything's done here. Even the long-term ones are stored here, and they're not stored as snaps. The only time you might see a snap is on the first replica run when we're doing the replication. That very first copy. After that, that snap is gotten rid of. We do the CDP policy. And it all gets stored here. Now, what that looks like, down here to my replicas ready, I'll do my CDP demo. You can see this. Now, if I go to a given point in time, here's that given point in time. Every 15 seconds, I'm going to use my arrow keys. And if I had this back far enough, which unfortunately I do not, you would see a crash consistent point periodically. There we go. There's my one crash consistent point this morning. See, a little darker. And then if I had older ones for long term, you would see those as well here. So, and that's how that is done. So that is the CDP policy. You can see that's still getting set up here with that initial sync. It's got to replicate that whole hard drive. I'm not doing too bad. And then complete. Right? So that's CDP. Those are the steps to set it up. It's actually very quick. You can only, and I should point this out while we're here. If you'll notice, I have a failover now, add to a failover plan, fail back. I cannot do a planned failover. There's not enough deltas in there. Planned failover says replicate, shut down, replicate, power on. So that is one thing you cannot do with this. Excuse me. All right. So like I said, that's CDP. Oops. Bring that back. Where is that? That's what I want. So the next thing I want to show is the immutability. Now, before I get into this, I'm going to share a page here. And this is from the user guide. So this, anybody can do a search and find this. This is a step-by-step walkthrough. So yes, you can come back here, you can listen to me, or you can simply go out to Veeam's user manual, which is a great tool, and it will walk you through creating a folder on your Linux server, assigning it, giving it the correct permissions, then adding it. So it's right out there, but I am going to share and show you this. Okay. Now, I've already created a Linux system. Okay. As you can see, this is my repository. So I've created a share, mount point. It's 100 gig. And I've created a user called repo user. That's the owner. And I've given them, and only them, well, them and root, read, write, access, read, write, delete, access. They're the only ones that can look in here. Okay. So they're my dedicated user. But so once you've done that, now we go into our infrastructure and we say, all right, I want to do a backup repository. We're going to add a repository. Eventually. It'll be direct attached storage. Again, we're going to call this one repository demo. If I could type 10.0. And I'm just going to clear that one out. Now, I have not added this Linux server in. That was intentionally. And I don't have it set up to my DNS, so I'm going to cheat and simply use the IP address. Now here's the key, is how you're adding it. This is the new way to add this server. Add. Oh, why are you doing? Oh, I picked the wrong one. I apologize. That was me. Thought I clicked Linux back there. I did not. My fat finger did. I apologize. I did want to do direct attach, but I wanted to choose Linux. That was me clicking too fast. So Immutable repo. Oh, go next. Now we'll click our add new. Here's where we get a new one. And this is the key. It's single use credentials. So one of the things I had to do was I had to create a user that was a non-privileged, non-root user for this. So I'm going to use that. You saw it was repo user, right? Or sorry, Veeam repo. Password. Now I do want to share something here. Veeam, for those of you that have been around Veeam for a while, you know there is a best practice site, and the best practice site is great. However, if you are doing this and you're using that as a walkthrough, there is something that you need to be aware of. Okay. This does not show that you check the elevate. Now, you don't want to add the user. This is just to install. So you do need to elevate it and do the SU if, sudo fails. And this will only show up here now. If I come back through, which I'll show you here in a moment, later, this will no longer show up. This user is there once. After that, we create it's never stored in the credentials on the VBR server. It creates that trust relationship. The other thing I want to point out is here. You'll notice there's a transport service. So this is also a new V11 feature. Prior to V11, the Linux repositories would get the transport service installed dynamically. Now it actually will reside on that repository. So we're going to let the install go through here. Okay. Make sure everything is installed, get the Veeam data mover service out there. This will take a minute or two to go through and get set up. But again, you want to make sure that you have only done the single use. And while we're talking about this, of course, as with anything, okay, this is only as secure as your environment makes it. This is secure from the Veeam perspective. However, if you've got somebody who can go in and sit at the console of this VM or server, if it's physical, however you got this set up, and get that root level access, well, they can go in and do that. It's not something that is, again, we're not protecting against, man in the chair, man in the middle type attacks where they're sitting here. Okay. So we've got that server there. We'll go next. Tells me about it. Now I can populate that. We'll go out. It will find my repo. I click next. Check that Linux server, make sure it's there. So now it's there. And I did enable that. If you recall, I didn't point this out, but if you were paying attention, I did format this with XFS, but this is your key right here. There's the immutability. How long do you want to make this immutable? Yeah. Yeah, there is your limit. Didn't realize you could do 9,000 and that was $9.99. 9,999. If you have the space for that kind of a thing. Just remember, again, anything like any other immutability, immutability starts from where you set it. You set it, going forward, that's the immutability for anything that gets moved in here. Yeah. So you can also come in here, like the permanent machine files. Go next. And the rest of this goes through as you would expect. Oh. Did I not put in the right user? Maybe I didn't put in the right user. No, it wouldn't have gone in. I may not have. No, it shouldn't have gotten that far. Interesting. Oh, there we go. Just wasn't happy. Okay. So evidently it timed out there. So we'll go ahead and do that. Apply. And now it's okay. Sorry, occasionally the home lab does little things that I point to sunspots. But this will go through. Oh, no, we're still getting that. Oh, I know what it is. I actually do know what this is. It's that. The file name's already there. Can't get rid of the file name. I don't have permissions. And this will go through and should deploy everything. No, not for sure I was right. I may have picked that wrong user. That was not good of me. I apologize. This is not working the way I was expecting. I had it working this morning. We're on the right one. Yes, yes, yes. Let me bring up the one that I've got because I do already have a immutable. It's a slightly different IP address. You can actually see the whole thing in here. I think I may have put in my wrong username that I needed. But this one is already set up, as you can see, with everything pre-configured. Now I do want to show something really quick here. I'm going to go back. Again, I can make this change, but it's only going to change anything that gets put on there going forward.
We have a question in the chat or in the Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
If you put the wrong username, can you not recover since it's only shows it once?
That's a great question. And what you would need to do to truly recover is actually, I would need to remove that particular one because like you said, it does only happen once. So what I would need to do is simply come in here, remove this and re-add it. So it's not a horrible thing to do. So I just need to and remove it. I don't think I need a sudo, but we'll, just in case. Always better to be safe than sorry in this instance, and it will remove that. So you would have to go back and re-add that Linux if you got the wrong user. Well, that's done. Oh, there we go. So I am going to pull up my other one here. I think it was the 87. need to rename these. Okay. Oh, no, that's not it. It is 89. So I do want to point out again, so to your question, whoever that was, looks like Lauren, as you can see, that user is not stored in the credentials, and I did want to point that out. Okay. That was a great question. So yes, you can, you would need to go through and re-add. Good question. Thank you. So, other question? Well, used to doing that because usually follow-ons come in. All right. So I do want to point out while we're here. So anything else? Because this will move on. That is the repository. Like I said, you come back in here if you need to change that immutability time frame. Oh, you go back to your repository, not from the server. Back to the repository. And you simply come into the repository and change it. Just keep in mind, like all immutability, the change takes place on things going forward. So again, if I've done any backups that I have done, because I have used this repo, the backups I have done are 7 days. If I change this to 10 days, then going forward, any new backups are 10 days. Immutability changes only from the point of definition, if you will. Or if I want to lower that. Cancel. So the next thing is where I'm looking at kind of keeping an eye down there on time as well. Backup proxies. So this is a pretty quick one to kind of show, but this is one of my favorite little things here that Veeam has done. And that is to enable the backup proxy. Any existing backup proxies you have that might have been Linux and any going forward now support all transport modes. Prior to V11, and actually I should say just in V10, because that was the only time you could have a Linux backup proxy, your only mode was virtual appliance mode. And that was it. However, now it does support direct storage access, network mode. It even supports, even supports backup from storage snapshots with this, provided it's not a NAS device. So we're using iSCSI, fiber channel. We cannot at this time use NAS with this for backup from storage snapshots. That's the main limitation that I've come across for the Linux proxy. But again, very easy, and it will automatically do this itself. Okay. Mine did this. I upgraded from 10 to 11. It will change the transport mode to this automatically. Can you use a backup proxy for restores from cloud? Are you talking about over? So this is a question came in. Can you use a backup proxy for restores from the cloud? Are you talking about, what cloud service? Are you talking about Veeam Cloud Connect? Are you talking about like backup or restoring directly from, say, a backup for Amazon or cold cloud storage? So the capacity tier, because with the archive tier, I will bring that up since archive tier is the new. Archive tier does have to temporarily move that data. So the follow-up to that was cold cloud storage. If you can hold that, if you're talking about the archive tier, if you can, state that, if that is what you're talking about, if you can hold that for just a little bit, when I get to that towards the end, I'll talk about what happens there. That's actually a couple of steps. Okay. All right. So yeah, so hold on. We'll talk about with the archive tier. Worm is, well, sort of similar, but I will talk briefly about that question. So the follow-on is restoring from cloud or worm. So remind me, Michelle, if you could remind me that I don't forget, even though I'm looking at it, I will address that. Right. But I did want to point out the proxies here, that's a new feature, and I do know a number of students that were excited about that because they want to use more Linux. Always a good thing. So a couple of other things here. We're taking a bit longer than I thought I was going to. So I'm going to show you very quickly a few additional things here, but still want to, take the time to do and show you correctly. So I'm going to show you an instant VM recovery. I'm going to just kick this off and let it start going. So I'm going to do an instant recovery. This is a VM that is sitting on a vSphere environment. Okay. So we'll do an instant. Oh, there's me going and not clicking where I wanted to. So an instant recovery of this VM. I go out, I only have one Hyper-V host sitting out in my environment right now. Next. Yes, I know I have a data sovereignty issue there. You're not in the same locations. I'm not going to bother connecting it because this one is on. So we can do a nice save there, but we're going to go ahead and we'll power it on. Okay. And this will go through. And if I want to actually see this, okay, this is my Hyper-V environment. And you can see it does not exist out here right now. I'll minimize that while it is going through and restoring. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and we'll let this go through. It won't take too long. I don't think. Again, modifying it because it is on a different environment. And you can see it's already showing up here. And we'll then turn on and become available. You know what? I'm going to let that close because it is showing here. It's not quite complete, but rather than do this because I'm watching time, I do want to show you a couple of these other things here. I'm going to go a little out of order because one of them will happen very quickly. The other one will take a little more time. So I'm going to do a really quick thing of the instant file share. Now, the instant file share does require SMB. I can see this is, I would stay here, but in all honesty, all you're now doing is waiting. So we'll show you that that is up and running here in a bit. But the SMB, so this is instant file share recovery. As you can see, all I have to do is find that file share and do an instant file share recovery. The mount server will use the default mount server, or I can specify where I want it to mount. Okay. It's going to check that file server, make sure it's valid for this. Okay. Now, you'll notice this does show the owner account, the permissions. If that didn't choose, or I wanted to choose a different owner, I can. So you can change, okay, the owner, and you can even change permissions, but it is read only. So there is no way to edit this. People cannot delete. But this will pop up just like my instant recovery. We'll close that as it mounts, pop up here. But you can now see it's waiting for me for that Hyper-V. Why did I move that over here? It changed screens for some reason. There it is in my Hyper-V. Okay, so that one is now up and running inside my Hyper-V environment. And I'm just going to stop publishing that. I don't need to fail over. This one has been published already. It took all of 11 seconds or so. I can simply click to open the file share. If I wanted to say, this is my configuration backup, this is one of the ways I do that. If I wanted to try to delete one of these, it would say, try again. It's all right protected. Okay. Again, if you want to modify these, you store them locally, make your edits. When the file share is back up and running fully, you could do this, but this is a way to get people access. Okay. Publishing. Let that go. It won't take very long. Okay. And then let me, pull this last little thing up here. I'm just going to show where this is, hopefully very quickly, because I do have that one question outstanding, and we have a couple of things to talk. So this is the instant recovery. I'm going to choose to go to a different server. I'll pick the current one. Okay. And actually say to come to this systems 2016. Okay. And this is my local host. Actually, I want to change the database name to reports because this one has that. And I do not want it to go to that same file. Otherwise, again, it will overwrite. And I'll change everything there. Next. And here's what I wanted to mainly show here. So I'm doing an instant database recovery to a different location or to the same location. This is the new feature. Well, the fact that I can do it is a new feature in 11. This is new on instant VM recovery to the same that you can do a automatic failover. And this is another thing you can set up here where it's once I get everything up and deployed, and I've actually recovered it to production. Do you want me to, because we have to shut down the original to bring it back up once we finish everything off, do you want it to happen automatically as soon as it's done? Do you want to do it yourself so it's sitting there in instant recover? Or, you know what, I want to do that at midnight when I'm asleep. You can set any time you want. So this is a really neat feature. It helps so that you can do those switchovers scheduled rather than sit there and have to babysit. Okay. I know that was a little quick, but I did want to also get to this last question here before I turn it back over to go over a couple other things in the slides and get everybody with their day. So if you do have additional questions on that, I'm leaving it up and running there, or on anything, please ask. But that last question is dealing with restoring from the cloud or worm. So if you're restoring from a repository out in the cloud, a capacity tier, or even an archive tier, to do the archive tier, you will have to bring it back. Now that's something, because it's usually on Glacier or Azure, dang it, I'm not thinking of the Azure long-term storage terminology. I think that's basically it, Azure Archive. You have to tell it to you, because that's not cheap. Now, Veeam is very good about things like that. We are watching the metadata, so we're only going to bring back the bits we need. We're also going to warn you before, because you're going to tell us how long you want it local before we push it back. Now that out there from archive to capacity is done through a temporary proxy that's deployed out inside Azure, Amazon. Bringing it all the way out, you will be using a proxy of some kind. Okay. So, well, yeah, a transfer of some kind, but what you will really be doing at that point, we do have to get it back in. So what really happens is, if you're doing this, you're on a scale out repository. Okay. So that scale out repository for me has 2 performance tiers and a capacity tier. If I want to restore anything from the capacity tier, it moves it down to the performance tier first. So we're not using a proxy for that. We're using a proxy to restore from the performance tier. So all restores are done from the performance tier, even if we have to move the data from the capacity tier first. Now, we will only move data necessary. So for instance, if I have a forever forward or any kind of a backup chain, and some of that data, because it's been unchanged, is still part of my local storage, Veeam has that understanding through its metadata of what's where. And it will only pull from those tiers because it's slower and it's more expensive if it needs to. So it's not going to pull right through a proxy from a cloud or an archive in that regard. It does have to be pulled down into using the transfer method of the scale out repository into the performance tier, if that makes sense.
We have a question asking for what the recommended trainings and associate certifications are. Can you talk about some upcoming trainings?
Definitely. That's where I was going next, so thank you. Recommended trainings. The Veeam Availability Suite Configuration and Management. We call it VASCM. This is a 3-day training. This has been out for a very short time for the V11. This will give you that technical hands-on deep dive into configuring and administrating Veeam. Not everything in here is covered. I have a couple of things that are duplicates a little bit, but we do cover quite a bit more because it is 3 days. This is also associated with a Veeam Certified Engineer, VMCE certification 2021. Highly recommend people go out and grab that. It's a great certification, and it gives you a no queue for you code if you ever need to call Veeam. I highly recommend people to go out there and get that. The Veeam Backup and Replication Architecture and Design. This is exactly what it says. This is a 2-day course. I do recommend you have assimilated the Veeam training, the configuration and management, or are very familiar with Veeam before sitting that course. It's a great course. It goes through the design process, the architecture methodology. It was developed by Veeam Solution Architects. So this is what they use to create those deployment models. Again, great certification, great course. You can learn quite a bit in it. I love teaching. I've taught the V10 course. I'm currently getting certified for the 11, but I see we've got a V11 certified instructor out there listening in to me. Yes, I saw you. Who I think is one of the best instructors I've heard and listened to. So, and no, that's not just a shameless plug. It's because I know him. He's a great guy. So, you know, he's been handling those until I can get myself and have some time to breathe and spin up on it. I'm sure that he'll continue to do so as we work together. So both are great options. If you're looking for that hands-on though, that first one is the one you want to look at. The other one is a much more, again, architecture course. This is something that if you are architecting multiple or a very complex environment that you would look at. Okay.
There's been a few name drops of Exit Certified Tech Data being some of the best Veeam training partners on the market. And, you know, maybe that is biased, but Veeam did recognize Exit Certified as the #1 authorized training center and the only partner that did teach on Veeam on. So there is lots to say why you should train with Exit Certified. And we are also excited to offer you some savings on your training. I've linked the promo in the chat window, an opportunity to save up to $500 on your public training or $500 a day on private training events. You'll find all of the information linked in the chat window once again there. Thank you all so much for sticking around to watch the demos to learn about Veeam. We have a couple great comments and questions in the Q&A, and I just want to let you know that we will be reaching out to you directly very soon to get in touch and answer some other questions you may have. Hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Paul, thanks again for an excellent presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody's patience in waiting and going through all those demos. So thank you.